Welcome to this episode of Modern Sales Wisdom Podcast. Today, we're going to be speaking about coaching. Coaching is a big topic, and we're going to have a great guest, somebody who has over 35 years of sales experience and over 20 plus years in coaching and learning and development. Let's welcome Mike Faber.
If you are at the starting line of a 10K race and you're a runner, you need to know the course and you need to know where the finish line is. Coaching without a clear objective is like being at that start line, but not knowing the course and not knowing where the finish line is. You might run 5K, 10K, you might run 41K for a full marathon and not reach the objective.
As an International Coach Federation accredited coach and having multiple coaching certifications, Mike has coached in over 6 continents, which is incredible. And today we're going to be speaking to him about all these kind of things because we're at the beginning of the year, where is the time where you set your New Year's resolutions and you think about how to accomplish these goals in the next year. You're going to have small steps in order to get there, and you're probably not going to do it by yourself. You're going to need somebody to help you. That's why coaching is such an important and game-changing thing that you can do. In order to understand and get a big understanding of it, we're going to start by talking about coaching, mentoring, and training, what the differences are. We're going to be following up and having a look at what it means to align your goals, your personal goals, your company goals, all these kind of goals which they have. And finally, we're going to have some actionable tips and tricks which you can take to your next coaching sessions to make them even better. And Mike is going to tell us how to do that. Now, if you believe that the sales world is always evolving and ever changing, then this podcast is for you, because Modern Sales Wisdom, I do out of passion for the sales community, for you guys to educate and to learn and to grow together. So if you haven't done so, smash that subscribe button and leave me a like. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then you are the best. Then please smack that bell as well. If you're listening to this on Apple Music or on Spotify, thank you so much. I love comments and interaction. If you want to reach out to Mike or me on LinkedIn, it's probably a great place, or here on YouTube, then I'm looking forward to those conversations. But now let's get to this incredible conversation with Mike Faber. Mike, it's so great to have you here on the show. And I'd love to kick it off just by framing the situation at the beginning. What is coaching for you?
Yeah, so good question. I think a lot of people confuse coaching with a couple of different professions or practices. So coaching really is a collaborative engagement between two or more people, where the objectives are clearly set. And a coach, I like to say, doesn't push you or pull you towards an objective, but a coach walks with you, sort of hand in hand. And that's different from the other disciplines that are somewhat related to coaching. So, for instance, being a trainer or being a mentor, or being a manager or a performance manager. So, coaching really, I think, in a nutshell, is that collaborative process between two people where you're working towards a common objective, or an objective of the person who is the client in this case.
And in sales, and the people watching this are primarily people working in sales. And
Sure.
do you choose your coaches? I mean, there's a lot of coaching programs that companies set up. What is a good
Right.
practice to know who to walk that walk with?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. I think one of the common misconceptions is that the best coach for a salesperson is their manager. And I will say this, that there's no definitive line. So I can't tell you your manager is your best option for your coach or your manager is the worst option for a coach. A manager controls compensation, reward, and promotion. And sometimes that can get in the way of pure coaching. So, what I like to recommend is that someone find a coach who is outside of their hierarchy, outside of their reporting structure. And that to me is the first sort of must have. And that's because once a coach is outside of that reporting structure, they can maintain a higher sense of objectivity about the goals that a client wants to reach, and also about a time frame for that reaching those objectives.
So it's not the end of the quarter, which you have to have it
You know,
accomplished.
that's yeah, Henry, and that's part of the issue. So I've been in sales longer than I'd like to admit, um, going on 35 years or so, I think, at this point. And I know the pressures of whether it's the end of the day, end of the week, end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year. And as a coach, because I'm working independently of those organizations, I can focus entirely on the salesperson and not have to be concerned so much with how that salesperson's efforts are going to make me look.
Mhm. And how would you say, is there a difference in coaching in a professional sales environment, or let's say a sports team? Because that's the
Mhm.
analogies which I often get. It's like, who can get you to run that a little bit faster? Or you have your coaches with the NBA stars, or
Right.
in football in Europe.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately for me, I'm a Manchester United fan, so I'm not going to use Eric Ten Hag as an example. But let's pick Jurgen Klopp
Yeah.
at Liverpool. So Klopp's objective is to maximize the performance of each of the players on his field, or on the pitch, excuse me. And so with a sports team, um, a coach is concerned in this case with putting the best 11 on the field. And that can mean demoting people, it can mean promoting people, it can mean treating people differently. So Klopp is going to treat his sixth midfielder different than he treats Mo Salah, their striker. And so in this case, when I'm coaching someone, or I'm coaching salespeople, I'm treating everyone the same. It doesn't mean they all come with the same level of talent or the same level of issues or challenges. It just means that I'm giving the opportunity to each of those people to maximize their own performance, and also I'm not looking at a table. I know that if my client doesn't succeed at all her objectives, she's not going to get relegated to the second division.
If we're talking about improvement and goal setting, what would you
Mhm.
say are good strategies or tactics to say, I need people? I mean, some people say I need coaching, I need more
Right.
guidance in a certain direction to walk somewhere, or maybe someone says, I think you need some coaching in this direction. I mean, I get that as well, but maybe I'm not the right person. So how do you make sure you understand where to go, how to set the objectives, and then actually find that well, not a mentor, but that coach who can take you there?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's important to recognize that coaching is not correction.
Hmm.
So, if a salesperson isn't making their phone calls because they're either not interested in the business or they've lost their passion for sales, that's not something a coach can really help with. That's more performance management. The first and most important thing to do with any objective is to be really clear about what you're shooting for. And the analogy I like to draw is if you are at the starting line of a 10K race and you're a runner, you need to know the course and you need to know where the finish line is. Coaching without a clear objective is like being at that start line, but not knowing the course and not knowing where the finish line is. You might
Hmm.
run 5K, 10K, you might run 41K for a full marathon and not reach the objective. So, first and foremost, a clear objective. I always recommend using SMART criteria. And SMART, as probably much of our audience knows, stands for specific, measurable, attainable, or achievable. That can go either way, results oriented, and time bound. So
Hmm.
once an objective is clearly stated and clearly understood by all parties, then we can have a successful coaching engagement.
If you're enjoying this conversation, then please smash that subscribe button, leave me a like or a comment. I do this out of love and joy for you, for the sales community. So let's get back to the conversation. Enjoy. If I need coaching, or if I say I'm I want to develop myself in a certain way, because we're at the beginning of the year, people have ambitions where they want to go, and most of us know we're not going to get there by ourselves. So where do you get that
Right.
external learning from? You can do online courses and stuff, but it's not the same as having a coach who
Yeah.
says, listen, I know which buttons to push. Maybe they're not the best in a football analogy, not the best player themselves, but it's they see right through it. They know where to push, and they know how to get you to that little bit extra as well. So setting the goals is one part, But what I'm also curious about is like there's more than just setting the goal. There's finding the way to get there, and there's different coaching styles which you need to know which
Right.
one fits you. Is that something which comes out of you, or do you just find your coach? You have, you've had lots of experience in this. Is there people that just get drawn to a certain style of coaching, or is it that you as a coach also need to know exactly how to move that one person from A to B?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter than the former, candidly.
Okay.
And it's a really good question because um, you can sort of discern coaching quality based on years of experience or experience in a particular um, vocation, for instance, in sales. But as a coach, it's up to me to adapt my style to some degree to what the client's needs are. And I will tell many clients at the start of our engagement um, that there may be times when I have to ask a really tough question, a question that they perhaps know internally but haven't really confronted themselves. And I've told a few clients over the years, there's a point in our relationship where you're going to want to fire me because I've asked you a question that makes you feel very uncomfortable. I'm not asking that question to be a jerk. I'm asking that question because I think we've hit a barrier that in order to gain true success, we need to push through. And I'm not going to shove you through, just like before when I talked about
Yeah.
pushing versus pulling. I'm not going to shove you through that barrier. I'm going to get through that barrier with you. But getting through that barrier is going to require me to ask some tough questions and you to confront some tough truths. One of the exercises that I like to engage in with coaching clients is something I call fiction. So, to give you an example, if I say I'm not very good at cold calling, um, that's that's not a fact. No one's good or bad at cold calling. Cold calling just is. I mean, you pick up the phone. In the olden days, you actually literally picked up a phone. Um, but but that's a fiction. That's something that we're telling ourselves as salespeople um, as sort of an avoidance strategy, candidly. And so pushing through that barrier, pushing through that fiction allows us to put that to the side and confront any real issues. So maybe it's the technique around cold calling. Maybe you're not cold calling the right um, persona within an organization, that type of thing. But we won't understand that difference. We won't understand that obstacle until we confront it, till we diagnose it, and then we can move on.
And how do you identify these blockers, or is there a common problems that come up all the time? Is it a mental block, or is it a skill question where you just feel uncomfortable and then you need to skill up on a certain level? What are the typical things you see?
Well, I use cold calling not at random. I mean, that's one of the toughest things we do as salespeople. Uh, I um, I did some analysis, data analysis years ago, and figured that in about 5 years of sales, my first 5 years in sales, I made just less than a quarter of a million cold calls,
Oh.
which is why I have the hairstyle I have today. So, and so, sometimes it's not effort, sometimes it's misaligned effort. What I didn't think about at that time, this is a true personal example, is my background was in broadcast television, radio, and speaking in front of large groups. So instead of making those 240,000 cold calls, I could have hosted a seminar once a month in front of 50 or 60 people who actually wanted to be there and wanted to hear from me. I could maximize the use of my talent on stage and probably walk away with many more clients than I did cold calling. Um, and so sometimes it's effort, sometimes it's attitude, sometimes it's aptitude. But all of those things can be addressed through coaching. They're really hard to address sometimes because we all have blind spots. For me, that blind spot was that aha moment that I should have had that said, wait a minute, why am I why am I banging away at a telephone on a desk when I should be planning a strategy that's more in tune with my talents and candidly with my passion? I love speaking in front of groups. I love doing podcasts. I love doing broadcast television. Why I didn't do it, I'll have to go back and ask the 28-year-old me. But I didn't have a coach, and I didn't have an objective um, perspective to point that out to me at that time.
Yeah. I think you said something really interesting. It's really about identifying what's going to get you to where you want to go, right? So what you said at the
Mhm.
beginning is if you know what your goal is and there's different paths to get you there, maybe that can block um, one of those blind spots that you have away, or push through it in order to get somewhere else. Um,
Yeah,
we don't just have personal goals which we need to address, which we're being coached towards.
sure.
We have company objectives, we have leadership goals where it says this is going to be our regional EMEA or US centric um, uh, strategy, go to market. And then all of a sudden maybe you feel uncomfortable because it is the metrics is dramatically more calls, or the metrics is public speaking, we're going to events and people are like, I haven't seen anybody in 3 years, I can't meet people physically. There's all these kind of things that happen.
Sure.
um, but how do you make sure you align these goals, and maybe also looking at the current situation with the way people are going, that everybody's looking for personal fulfillment? Would you say coaching is something very based on situations, or something which is based on making a person whole as a
So, yeah, I'm going to cop out and say both. So the answer to both of those questions is yes. Um, I like to think of my coaching practice as being holistic, and in that sense, if my client is not fulfilled personally, it's very hard for them to be fulfilled professionally, and vice versa. And so when one of those questions that I'll ask that you know might tick somebody off or make them feel uncomfortable is, let's talk about what's happening outside of the 10 hours you spend at work. So I'm coaching an executive currently here in the States, and in order to ensure that our coaching objectives, are aligned with company key performance indicators, KPIs, I've talked with my client's boss a couple of times. Now, that doesn't mean I'm talking about the coaching sessions, because confidentiality is absolutely the number one most important thing to keep as a coach. The only time I will violate confidentiality is if someone threatens to harm themselves or others.
yeah.
And I tell clients that, it's hasn't happened in 25 years of coaching, but it's something people need to hear. But when it comes to, especially if a company is hiring me to coach their executives or coach their managers or their salespeople, I'll ensure that I'm at least aware of the key performance indicators. It doesn't mean that coaching interaction won't go different places, but the KPIs are something that we're trying to serve all along.
All right. um so if you know where you want to go, and everybody says if you're
Mhm.
doing it together you can move mountains, you can get a lot done. And I mean, I've seen breakthroughs, I've experienced breakthroughs in different things where people just change the perspective of how I see things.
Right.
What my experience in leadership as well is, there's so many different ways the people learn or have those aha moments, and I find it
Mhm.
really difficult to trigger them with some people. With some people, it's like I know exactly which buttons to press, but maybe that's some coaching which I could get. How do you really spot these different indications in
Right.
some people? Um, but there's also a benefit for the coach, right? Because it's
Sure.
a two-way conversation, which I want to say. That's why I want to say you're moving, especially if you're in the same company, moving mountains together. How would you facilitate this? You said setting clear objectives. If you're looking
Mhm.
for somebody, I mean, I've had people come to me, they normally ask for mentorship, not as in a
Right.
coach, because a coach is probably a bit more hands-on. But how do you align these goals, set these goals? Do you make a Google Doc? What's a good structure that you can really walk away with and say, listen, we're going to set these 20 goals? And Ali Abdul, I don't know if you know him, a productivity,
Mhm.
a big
Sure.
person. His book just came out, and there's a lot about setting different things, which is personal. There's job, there's money, all these different things which have to be aligned, and you make your scoring, and you kind of pick your battles, and not too many, but you enjoy the process. That's the important part
Right.
in his theory. Um, what I yeah. So how do you? Is there a good strategy, a good tactic, which you would say, or which you would recommend for somebody?
For selecting or identifying what those goals are.
And working at them. So
Oh,
if you're
gotcha.
considering
Okay.
that the most people listening to this now, and they're sales professionals, and then they say, "Well, I need a coach. I need somebody to take me there. Who can that be? And how can I hold myself and that person accountable in order to get there?" Is there a good framework which you would say, meet once a month, or a week, or have
Yeah.
different cadences?
Well, there are a couple of things. So one is identify your big, hairy, audacious goals, and I think it was Jim Collins who first sort of coined that phrase. I may be mistaken, but working towards two or three goals is a lot easier and much more realistic than working towards 15 goals. So what I like to do is, if we're going to have three goals, um, and it's I'm coaching someone in sales, uh, let's have a sales goal, let's have a professional development goal, and let's have a personal goal. So the sales goal might be, I want to be in chairman's club, so I want to hit 125% each quarter for the following year, for this year. The professional development goal might be, I want to uh, start a podcast and talk about sales techniques, and I want to have 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And the personal goal might be, you know what, I'm not taking care of my body. I want to start a meditation practice that I start and begin, and that I start and carry through the year. So those are examples of that sort of triumvirate of goals. And then ensuring that you're making progress is not about making the goals on January 1, like a New Year's resolution, and checking in on December 31st.
Hmm.
So part of what we'll do in a coaching relationship is ensure that the client is making incremental steps on those goals throughout the year. So if we meet twice a month, and that's a typical cadence for coaching practice, if we meet twice a month, you're going to have a small goal set for the personal development. I'm sorry, for the sales goal, the professional development, and the personal development. You're going to have a small goal for each 2 week segment. You don't
Hmm.
have to articulate those at the beginning of the year. This is one of the common mistakes that's made with New Year's resolutions. Um, but we're not only going to track your progress on those small goals, but we're going to celebrate your successes. So if you set the goal, for instance, to start a yoga meditation, or a meditation practice, if the goal is to meditate 3 times for 5 minutes apiece by, you know 2 weeks from today, and you achieve two, and you do 2 sessions of 5 minute meditation, we're going to celebrate that, because that's a change in a pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
Likewise, if you've identified on the professional side, um, that you're going to start the podcast, if you've bought the equipment for the podcast, we're going to celebrate that. On the sales side, if you've made 5 appointments to meet new prospects, we're going to celebrate that success. So it's not just about identifying the big, hairy, audacious goal. It's about understanding what will get you there incrementally. I used
Hmm.
the running race analogy before. If you say you're going to run the Berlin Marathon at the beginning of the year and you don't train for the Berlin Marathon, you're going to be crawling at the finish line. You made it that far, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is, okay, if you're going to run that marathon, let's start with walking around the block three
Yeah.
times in the next week. Okay. And so that's, those are a couple of keys to successful completion of goals. Keep it varied, celebrate success, and celebrate incremental success. Don't think about that, that finish line tape um, at the end of the marathon, at
Yeah.
least not right away.
What do you think we're missing? I mean, we've looked at coaching from different angles. What do you think we're missing, which we still need to bring in here?
So a couple of things. One I would say is there's an international coaching federation, or ICF, that certifies coaches at varying degrees of levels. I always recommend that people, whether they choose me as a coach or someone else, um, the fit is most important. And I always recommend that you find a coach who is ICF accredited. I think that's one thing, because it shows they're adhering to a specific um, code of ethics. It shows that they're dedicated to improving as a coach, and and that they understand the difference between coaching, mentoring, training, performance management. Um, I think the other thing too is coaching is not just the practice of just asking questions. So I've had a few clients tell me, you know what, you're asking me too many questions. Give me some direction here. And classic coaching is just asking questions to prompt self discovery. If I need to drop into mentor mode, I mean, as I said before, I've been in sales for 35 plus years. So I've made all the mistakes you can make, and probably more that you can't even imagine. And I've learned from a lot of those mistakes. So if I'm coaching and I see an opportunity to share part of my experience to help produce an aha moment, I'll say, for instance, if you were my client, I'd say, Henry, I'm going to move out of coach mode for a moment and move into mentor mode. Do I have your permission to do that? I've never had a client say no.
Hmm.
And then I'll say, here's what I'm hearing, and here's what I've seen work in this type of situation. Tell me how that feels to you. And I think there's a lot of discussion about this in the coaching world. And some people are vehemently opposed to sharing any type of experience that they've had.
Hmm.
And some people are vehement in their belief that you should act more as a mentor. I fall somewhere in the middle, candidly. But it's not my job as a coach to help you avoid all those mistakes. It's my job to shorten the learning curve so that those mistakes don't cost you what they cost me long ago. And I still was able to build a successful sales career. It just took me a lot longer because I didn't have a coach. I had a manager who'd come by my office every other day and say, "How come you're not selling enough? How come you're not here until 9 or 10 at night?"
Hmm.
And I'd say, "Well, I have a life." That's a whole nother story.
Mike, just to finish off, and maybe I want to say
Of
thank you as well. I mean, we've met in person
course.
before, and I've always found you very charismatic, and I was part of one of your trainings, which was great fun, and I definitely learned a lot. So thank you for that. Um,
Of course.
what was your big aha moment in relation to coaching, and would you say is the normal or the biggest aha moment you see again and again from people that you coach?
Um, so my biggest aha moment, candidly, was discovering that coaching was a thing. Um, I made the mistake long ago that many people in corporate around the world make, which is I thought coaching was telling people what to do or telling people how to do things, and it's not that. Coaching, as I said before, is a collaborative process that we go through together. That was my big aha moment, and I was fortunate for both myself and for my clients that came very early in my coaching career. I think the biggest aha, and I'm going to orient this towards salespeople, but I think the biggest aha is that is is salespeople recognizing that all of us in sales have blind spots, and we all have obstacles that are seen or unseen, um, that we can move past with a little help or with a little outside perspective. And when I talk to salespeople or when I'm coaching salespeople, I love to hear their stories. And I don't focus so much on why they're in sales. I focus more on what they want to achieve from sales.
Mm.
And a standard sort of answer is, well, I want to make more money. And I'll practice what I think is called the 5 whys. So why do you want to make more money? Well, I want a bigger house. Why do you want a bigger house? Well, my wife and I want to have 6 kids. I won't say why do you want to have 6 kids, but what I will do is try and drill down, because unless we understand as salespeople our intrinsic reasons for wanting success, it's really hard to reach those objectives. Sales is, it's the toughest profession out there and the oldest profession out there. And we're still learning about it. That's why you can walk into your local bookstore or go online and search for sales books and find a new one every day. It's not because the latest book has the answer. It's the latest book has some of the answers. And there's a lot of other answers out there yet to be discovered. One of the reasons I'm in coaching, candidly, is because I love to learn. And every salesperson, every sales manager has a different story. And I'm a nerd for those stories. So
That's a wonderful way to end this. Thank you so much, Mike, for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you, my friend.
Awesome. At the beginning of the year, it's critical to set those goals. So I thought that this topic, coaching and the conversation with Mike, was extremely timely. And I hope you got a lot of information from this, because I certainly did. There's a lot of things which I'm thinking about, of who to ask and where to maybe get a coach to level up on one or the other game, which I'm on right now. So if you haven't done so, I would love you to subscribe. Leave me a comment. I do this out of love, out of passion for the sales community. Reach out to Mike or me on LinkedIn. That's the best place. And or here on YouTube. If you're here on YouTube, then I look forward to meeting you on the next episode. Until then, have a great week.